Hey everybody, I'm Tami Kiekhaefer. I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
And my name is Desiree Grimaldi. Welcome to Unguarded Minds podcast, where we talk about the drama, trauma, and gritty things that life throws at you. Today we have a special guest, Duncan Brown. For some people, they would say Duncan can help you go beyond alcohol, but that isn't it. Duncan will help you increase your energy, power up your productivity, improve your relationships, and enjoy the heck out of life. Sorry. After 20 years of overdoing it, he cleaned up his act and trained the world's most successful stop smoking service. But that wasn't enough. He studied at Cornell University, the Chartered Management Institution, in the windowless room in Petersboro. But that wasn't enough. He wrote a couple books, most recently, Real Men Quit, The Armchair Macho Guide of Beating Booze and Finding the Life You Want. He started interviewing the sober superstars and conducting research projects that involved watching TV, but that wasn't enough. What would be enough? Maybe if the alcohol-free was a default, if sober was the new normal and alcohol stops destroying people, maybe then Duncan will sit down with a mint tea and a sci-fi novel. So, welcome, Duncan. I want to hear more about this windowless room that you had to sit in.
Well, you must have been in that training venue. You know, the one. So Peterborough is, if there's anybody listening from Peterborough, I'm sorry, but it's not the nicest part of the world. I don't know what the equivalent of it is in America. And rather than offend anybody, I won't start guessing. But, excuse me, it's not a nice part of the world. And then you're in this room, there's no natural light, there's no fresh air, just like awful, trying to concentrate. And I used to kind of like stick that in because I thought it was a fairly good gag. But actually, it's a great metaphor for what my life was like when I was drinking. It was like 20 years sitting in a windowless room with absolutely no fresh air.
Great analogy. I'm sure many people can relate with that windowless room.
Mm-hmm. So you started out your journey helping people go beyond alcohol. What brought you there, and how did you help people?
So for me, there wasn't one of those kind of like classic moments where you're staring into the mirror at 4 a.m., unfortunately, because they're nice and dramatic and they sound really, really good. But what happened over the period of a few months was I started to ask myself a question. And it was prompted by the fact that my wife and I, we decided to start a family, which was actually quite good fun. I mean, it wasn't the trying bit was fun. And then, we got into that kind of whole naive, optimistic new parent thing. And it all seemed to be going incredibly well. And then my wife had a miscarriage. And that was obviously really hard on her, both physically and mentally. But, I think what was worse was I just wasn't there for her. My standard reaction to stress was just to disappear into a bottle of wine. And that was clearly not what she needed at that moment. And, it sort of prompted me to think about what it was that I wanted from my life. And I realize now, I wouldn't have been able to articulate it at the time, but I realize now I was essentially asking myself this question. What do you want from life, Duncan? Do you want another drink or do you want to have a family? And the good news is I made the correct decision. And almost exactly 9 months after I stopped drinking, our daughter Leela was born.
Oh, wow. Oh. Mm-hmm. So what was it, just seeing your wife going through this alone, that's what made you said, okay, you've got two choices here, pick. Is that kind of your rock bottom aha moment?
Yeah, I think that just brought to the head, things that have been happening for a while. So when I started drinking, it was, it was all good fun, wasn't it? I was young and it was very social and I wouldn't drink very much, but I'd drink at parties, I'd drink with other people. But as time went on, the amount I drank increased, but the amount of people I drank with decreased, and it ended up that I did most of my drinking on my own. And it wasn't much fun. I mean, on the outside, if you looked at my life, you would have thought, oh, Duncan's absolutely smashing it. I was very successful. I was the kind of card carrying high functioner. And, it all seemed to be going very well. And to be fair, if you'd asked me, I'd have told you it was brilliant because I do talk a good game. But I was miserable. I was unhappy. I wasn't really doing the things with my life that I wanted to do. I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't being the person that I wanted to be. And I wasn't achieving the kind of things that were important to me. And I wasn't delivering the best for the people around me. So I'd got more and more unhappy over the years. And I think it just came to the head with that moment.
Mm-hmm. So did you... Go ahead, Desiree.
So did you create a court? Like, how did you obviously had to take care of yourself first, but what's the path you took to start helping other people realize that it wasn't a fix, it wasn't the escape, it wasn't all it's cracked up to be, it was something a little bit beyond just socializing, all the things.
Yeah. So I stopped smoking using a book called Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking, which many of your listeners might have heard of. It's a pretty popular book, sold millions of copies worldwide, helped a lot of people. And I sort of stopped drinking using the same kind of method, although I didn't really remember it entirely right. But when I sort of stopped drinking, what I was doing was I was working with people. I was writing, excuse me. I was, honestly, I have stopped smoking. So I was doing a lot of writing, I was doing a lot of speaking, and I was doing a lot of training, and I was helping other people to achieve the kind of success that I'd achieved in my life. And it sort of dawned on me that the most successful thing that I'd ever done was stopping drinking. And it gave me so many benefits. I had more energy, I had more, focus and determination. It seemed like I had more time. So it sort of made sense for me to want to share that with people. And because I've been very influenced by Alan's work, I decided to train with the Easy Way Clinic in London, which is the world's most successful stop smoking clinic. And I love their work. I still do a bit of work for them. But, I sort of, after a while, realized that there's more to it than that. So I don't tend to do things by halves. I do tend to get a little bit obsessed with stuff. So I just went on this kind of crazy certificate grabbing education binge. And I just tried to read everything and learn everything and find out as much as I could, not simply about what gets people sober, because actually, a lot of people manage to get sober. It's the staying sober that's the trick. So that's the thing that I'm really completely obsessed with, because I if you give me a bit of your time, I will help you to stop drinking. But, what you really need to do is invest the time in doing the kind of things that help you to stay stopped.
What are the percentages that you see of people, I'm in a time frame, like maybe 3 months after quitting, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, of people who can maintain that sobriety?
So that's quite a difficult question to answer because the statistics are a little bit patchy. Okay. If you look at sort of the rehab system in America, then, if 10% of people are still sober after a year, then, you are performing pretty well. If you look at the statistics for group programs like AA, they look a lot better, but they tend to have a very high dropout rate at the start. So if you stick with them, they tend to be quite successful. And then, a lot of people use various different cognitive realignment or cognitive behavior therapy models, which are not necessarily that well validated. So it's quite hard to say. The fact is, though, that people do get sober and people do stay sober. Sometimes it takes you a little bit of time, and it takes you maybe a couple of attempts. I know a guy called Chris. I think it took him 14 attempts, but he is now happily sober and, running a great business and doing some amazing stuff. So I think one of the things that we need to sort of do is think of stopping in a different kind of a way, because what the word stop suggests is like, bang, stop, you're done. But it's not. It's never just like, that was the day I stopped drinking. It's never like I stared into the mirror at 4 a.m. and took the decision. It's always a longer process, and it is always a process. And sometimes that process involves relapses. Sometimes that process involves slipping up. And I think helping people to understand that, slipping up does not necessarily mean the end. One mistake is not fatal. You can absolutely come back from that, and people do. So I think that's a more positive way of looking at it, shall we say.
Yes.
So does your program work with people who just realize that, alcohol is maybe maybe not great for them, but they're not necessarily an alcoholic? Or do you work with alcoholics as well? Because I know that there's a lot of risk. We talked about it, I think, last week on a podcast. There is a lot of risk with alcoholism, addiction, and trying to stop immediately, cold turkey, on your own kind of thing. Do you work with people from both sides of it, or?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right to point out that the potential for harm when you stop drinking is relatively severe. It's not that common, though. About 96% of people who stop drinking don't actually suffer any serious side effects from withdrawal. Most people who suffer from withdrawal suffer from moderate side effects. So rashes, it affects your sleep, you can sweat heavily, you can have stomach problems, you can have some sort of like slightly unusual feelings. The actual seizures and heart attacks and death, which is obviously the headline news, and we absolutely want to avoid that, which is why, we always recommend people seek medical advice before they stop drinking. But the vast majority of people that stop drinking don't actually suffer from those problems. There are some things that will make it more likely if you've ever had an addiction to benzodiazepine or any of those kind of medications, if you've got underlying health issues, or if you've had problems withdrawing from alcohol or in the past, then you're more likely to have that. And, if you've got some of those symptoms, then absolutely a medically supervised withdrawal period is the most sensible thing. But the fact is, about 45% of people who stop drinking don't actually have any formal support at all. Spontaneous sobriety or natural recovery, as it's called, is the most common way of stopping drinking. They don't go to rehab. They don't have any sort of medical assistance. They just stop. And most of the people that I work with, they're professionals. They're doing pretty well for themselves. They're high functioning. They just, they started drinking the odd glass of wine with dinner, and that sort of crept up over the years, and they got to the point where they might be drinking a bottle and a half, maybe even two. And at that level, so long as your underlying health is fairly robust, you can usually stop drinking without any problems. Some people choose to taper down for a variety of reasons, and that's cool as well. But I mean, in general, I think that the stereotypical idea of what an alcoholic looks like, largely thanks to Hollywood, is, that guy in the gutter with the spirits in a brown paper bag. But that is not the reality of most people who have a drinking problem. Most problem drinkers have jobs. About 80% of addicts have jobs, and they function. Yeah, I mean, function is such an interesting word, isn't it? I mean, my washing machine functions, so it's not really what you want to live your life that way. But most people who are drinking in a high risk fashion are functioning. They have lives, they have families, they have jobs.
And I think you brought up
they're creative.
Yeah. Well, you brought up such a good point earlier around, I heard you saying a lot about, I justified it and I rationalized it and I talked myself out of it, that I didn't really have a problem. And Yeah, I think that those are just such powerful tools that our brain uses, and you can justify and rationalize anything and make it a great idea. And so I think that, yeah, there's that. I don't know. I think there's two done points. There's the done point when you get caught, or you have a legal issue, or you had a really, really, really bad night and a lot of consequences. And then there's the done point where you go, I'm done. I have to be finished and I'm ready. Do you see that with the people that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. There's often something that prompts people. It's for the people I work with. A lot of the time, it's around families. So
Mm,
you know, guy whose daughter videoed him when he was drunk on her phone and
mm,
played it back to him the next morning, and he's just like absolutely mortified because
yeah.
that's not the parent that he wants to be. That's not how he sees himself. And you're absolutely right. Up until that moment, he was justifying it and rationalizing it and saying, I'm not that bad. Dave down the pub, he drinks more than me, so I can't have a problem. I've got a job, I can't be an alcoholic, all of that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
yeah, there is often a moment, but not always, and they're not always big things. And that's one of the things that I think it's important to stress. You don't need to have those rock bottom moments. You don't need to get a DUI,
Mhm.
or you don't need your partner to leave you. Ideally, what you want to do is deal with the problem before it gets so big that you
Yeah,
lose your job, your driving license, and your partner. And there are a lot of things, and they can often be kind of tiny. But if they're getting you thinking, then all you need to do is realize that awareness is the first step. Awareness is always the first step of dealing with a problem.
mm,
And whatever it is that makes you think that you might have a problem, you've taken the first step. So you've got to just run with it, and you've got to kind of look at your life and say, well, is it actually serving me?
I love that.
And I'm sure you battle, there's some cultural acceptance where you are around it. I mean, it's Tuesday, so go to the pub. It's sunny out, go to the pub. So I'm sure that's a whole reframing process that you have to work through with people, where it is so much more. I mean, our bars in most places in the United States don't open till after dinner, and so I'm sure that that's a struggle that you have to kind of overcome and redirect the mindset around it.
Yeah, I mean, alcohol is by far the most available addictive drug on the planet. It's also the cheapest addictive drug on the planet.
Mm,
So yeah, I mean that is a difficulty, and that is something that I personally struggle with, in the sense that I do want to see things change. We've done a lot of research on alcohol's portrayal in the media. So we did a study recently, found 86.5% of Netflix original shows branded 15 and 18 contained alcohol in them, and 86.5 is quite a high number. I did
yeah.
a 1 minute interval coding study on Painkiller, which was another Netflix thing. It's ostensibly about OxyContin and the opioid epidemic and the Sacklers, who are a bunch of horrible, horrible people. But the irony behind that show is that there's actually more alcohol consumed in that show than there is Oxy. There are more scenes of people drinking than there are scenes of people taking drugs. I'm also
Mm,
working my way through Griselda as well at the moment, which is about a cocaine baron in Florida. There's
mm,
actually very little drugs in it, but there is a ton of drinking and smoking. And I think that just goes to indicate how prevalent it is in society. If wherever you go, you will see alcohol. You'll see adverts for it. You'll see people drinking it. People talk about it all the time. People make jokes about getting drunk. And people do that in their workplace. You know, and I know we're becoming a lot more conscious about what we say when we're at work, because we don't want to offend people. And I think that's absolutely right. There are
mhm.
some jokes you just shouldn't make at work. And for my money, making jokes about getting drunk is one of them, because I think if you're just laughing at the fact that people get drunk and have issues in their life, you're kind of laughing at me and my friends who have suffered an awful lot from alcohol. So yes, I think absolutely society needs to change. In terms of working with individuals, what we try and do is get them to a position where they no longer want to drink alcohol. And if you don't want to drink alcohol, then actually navigating your way through a world that is completely drunk is relatively straightforward, because if you don't want to do something, it's not that hard not to do it.
No, but I think because you mentioned like corporate world and stuff, there's a lot of pressures. I knew somebody who their drinking, I don't know if they were necessarily an alcoholic, but their drinking definitely went beyond what they wanted because there was a pressure to go out with the office on Fridays after work for drinks. And she would say no. And it's just have one. Well, then it was 5. And then the next week it was 7. And, it just kept getting worse. But it was just that pressure that you wouldn't get that advancement. You wouldn't be recognized. You wouldn't, move up the ladder because you weren't mingling, on your social time with those people. So I think there's a lot of pressures too from certain jobs that you could have to go out for those happy hours and social gatherings.
Yeah, it's a massive problem in some industries. So you mentioned a few kind of really good points. So access to the boss. If you actually want to spend time networking with the boss is going to be old enough that they remember the good old days when drinking at work was actually a little bit more acceptable. So they are fairly likely to be heavy drinkers. In fact, 13.5% of the top earners in America drink every day, and there is no way to drink every day and not have a problem with drinking. 47% of high-earning college graduates in America drank yesterday. So if you want to get in with the people who are influential where you work, then absolutely you are going to have to drink, and that becomes then a hazard of a job. There's also the idea around a lot of client work happens in social situations, and that a lot of drinking happens around, impressing the clients. I can give you stories of people who were basically told to drink more. That was their performance review, was drink more, because if you're not drinking with the clients, they're not going to trust you. You add to that, have you ever been to a conference or an away day that didn't revolve around alcohol? I mean, there's so much drinking goes on at those big sales events and things like that. So I think that the corporate world really needs to wake up to this fact and become more aware of it, because actually employers have a duty of care to their staff. If they are participating in a work-related activity, then the employer has a duty of care to them. And if you gave your employee in a work-related setting a poisonous, flammable, carcinogenic chemical, then you'd have to ensure that they were properly trained to handle that they'd read the risk assessments, that everything was labeled properly, that the storage was safe. Alcohol is a flammable, poisonous, carcinogenic chemical, and you're giving it to your staff. And I think at some point, somebody is going to wake up and say, do you know what? I basically have a drinking problem because of my job. And do you know what? I'm going to go and find a lawyer, and I'm going to take that company for everything they are worth. Now, I don't know. Do you have many lawyers in America?
We have a couple.
So many.
No, I think that's...
but even that, the legal show, I'm obsessed.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm obsessed with a lot of the legal shows, and that every day they're in that conference room and they're sipping that whiskey or bourbon or...
the legal profession does tend to have some fairly...
I enjoy a drink every now and then. I grew up with alcoholic parents, so it was something I was more aware of growing up. I didn't drink until my 20s, and I remember telling my father, being an alcoholic, I said, if you start to see me drinking too much, you have to promise to let me know. And about a year went by, and he said, okay, I think you're starting to drink too much. He said, you're going Wednesdays you have to go because there's this event, and on Fridays you have to go because there's this event. And I was like 22. But it scared me, and I was like, okay, I'm done. And so I quit drinking for over a year just to make sure I could because it scared me so bad. And so now I socially drink, but I'm also very aware of my limits. I don't like the anxiety it gives me. I don't ever want to be drunk and feel like I'm out of control. The getting sick part is not for me. That's a hard no. So
the older you get, the harder it is to recover.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is. I think that when you're talking about in the workplace, you know, it'd be curious to see where things go 5 years, 10 years down the road. Like, is someone going to say, yeah, I have a drinking problem because of my job, or I get passed up for these promotions because I didn't go drinking with the boss? You know, it's just, it'll be curious to see where that goes.
I mean, it's starting to happen. There's been some industrial tribunals in France around employers expecting their employees to drink. France has some very forward-thinking labour laws. In Scandinavia, also, they have some fairly forward-thinking labour laws as well. A group of night workers sued their employers because they got cancer, and shift work is linked to cancer. Not half as strongly as alcohol, mind you. It's a possible carcinogen, and because they had no other reasons to, see why they'd get cancer, it was upheld that it would have been the night work that caused it. And if you think if people are like actually taking their employers to court for something as small as night work, I think the day for alcohol and litigation is definitely coming.
Interesting. So your work, you're doing outpatient work, right? It's not a facility. It's not inpatient.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a coach really by training, so I operate a kind of coaching system whereby I just help people to reassess their beliefs and thoughts around alcohol, and then find a way forward from to build the kind of life that they want to.
Yeah.
And it says that you've written a couple of books. You want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, so my most recent book is called Real Men Quit. And I had a friend at college, and we did a lot of drinking. And this is a big surprise, isn't it? College students drinking. And I think some of the people that we were with, they sort of toned it down a bit when they left university, but he absolutely didn't. He continued to drink and party very, very hard after university, and it caught up with him. He actually died when he was 27 of acute pancreatitis, very much related to alcohol. And the thing that I sort of reflect on now is that didn't stop me drinking. You would have thought that losing a close friend in their late 20s, you would have thought that would have got the message home. It did have an effect on me. I did sort of realize that at some point I was going to have to address it, just not today. And when I set out to write Real Men Quit, I wanted to sort of write something about his story and about him. And it kind of led me to this idea about men and alcohol. And there are a lot of amazing women out there who are doing a lot of amazing work in the sober world, Annie Grace being just about the most famous of them. And I love her stuff and everything, but as men, we are not necessarily covering ourselves in glory. We're not standing up and talking about escaping from alcohol, and we're not sort of helping each other very much. So I wanted to do something to kind of redress that. So I took John's story and this idea that men needed a little bit of help, and chucked it all together, added a bit of James Bond, some Star Wars, quite a lot of sport, and some fairly bad jokes. So if you want to reassess your relationship with alcohol and you like movies and sports and weak jokes, then it is without a doubt the book for you. And if you don't, but you know a guy who drinks too much, and you stop laughing, of course you know a guy who drinks too much, we're terrible for it. Then, you know, it's always good to get people presents, I think.
And I love how you said,
so
even
Annie
if
Grace,
I think we have, this is my internet connection. I'm sorry. I think we have an overlap. I think that what you said about if you're even thinking, I wonder if I am drinking too much, go with that. This sounds like a good book to just be able to get the thinking process going and do some reassessing. And yeah, that's important. Desiree, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't solve a problem you're not aware of.
Yeah.
And there is so much help out there these days. I know that particularly in America, there is a perception that the only way to stop drinking is through AA. And I know that a lot of people have certain resistance to AA. It does what it does very well, but it is not for everybody. Mm-hmm. And if you genuinely believe that's the only way to get sober and you don't think it's going to work for you, you then end up in a situation where you're basically stuck, aren't you? And that's the situation a lot of people find themselves in. They don't think there is another way, but there is. There's, you know, a huge amount of support out there these days. So there are a lot of other amazing group programs. Smart Recovery is brilliant. So much time for them. Recovery Dharma, Circle of Life. There's like literally hundreds and hundreds of group programs, and they all meet online these days. So you don't even have to leave your house. So group programs are great. You know, a lot of people stop drinking using a therapist. They sort of deal with the underlying traumatic issues that sit below their drinking. And once they've dealt with that, they find the drinking kind of falls away. Or you can just find a coach or a therapist that works in cognitive behavior or cognitive realignment. Annie Grace that I mentioned already, Alan Carr. You know, there are literally hundreds of them. Just go online. There are so many people out there. And I will say one thing for the recovery community is they genuinely want to help. They are, what a lot of people say, oh, I want to help people. And it's like, yeah, you want to help them open their wallets. But genuinely, the people in the recovery community, what we come from this point of view of, I am reasonably confident that I would be dead if I'd continued on the path that I was on. I am not dead, so I am quite grateful, and I kind of want to share that with everybody. And that's genuinely the attitude most people have. They actually want to help. So jump on Facebook, jump on Instagram, jump on LinkedIn, any of them. You will find groups of people who've got sober and are desperate to point you in the right direction and help you out.
That's amazing. I'm familiar with Annie Grace as well, and she is amazing. I don't know if it was a training. I was in a mentorship, and she came in and did some speaking with us, and a friend of mine works with her, and she is amazing. But she's, part of her story was the corporate world. That's how she started drinking, and that's how she started her whole process of this naked mind. But are you going to share all your links for your books with us so that people can check them out?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest way to find Real Men Quit is just go on Amazon, little known website. Just put in Real Men Quit, you will find it. It is up there wherever you are in the world. It's pretty available. If you want to have a look at my other book, Get Over Indulgence, all you need to do is put getover.uk into the internet, and that will take you to a bit of my website. And as a gift to your listeners, they can download that as a PDF or as an Audible Kindle version. And if you can stand to listen to me for 3 hours and 45 minutes, then you can listen to the audio one there as well. I will apologise now for the silly voices. So just put getover.uk and grab a free copy of Get Over Indulgence. Well, I hope you enjoy it. There are jokes. They're not all good. There are jokes.
You have to. You've got to make it entertaining. You've got to make it real. And because it's some heavy stuff that you're forcing yourself to look at when you're ready. So to add something light in there is like, Okay, I've got this. I've got this. So I
Yeah, I'm
appreciate
a
that.
firm believer in the idea that the book that will help you most is the one you actually read. So I've endeavoured to make my books entertaining, light-hearted, and not that long. In fact, people regularly tell me that they read Get Over Indulgence in one sitting, which I think is just about the biggest compliment an author can ever receive.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So what is one piece of advice that you might have for our listeners to get to that awareness piece or have some of that internal dialogue? What would you tell them?
So we always start with people's beliefs, and your beliefs massively underpin your actions. And I think most people don't really kind of appreciate this. So if you chilies, I always used to take the seeds out of chilies. That was because I believed that the seeds were the spicy bit in chilies. But that's not true. All of it's spicy. I mean, it doesn't matter which bit you eat. It's all spicy. Taking the seeds out doesn't help you at all.
Huh.
But I acted in a certain way because I believed something that was false. I now just don't eat any of the chili because it's too hot. And I think if you can get to grips with what you believe about alcohol, or just start to question it, you know, why is it you think alcohol makes you look sophisticated? Why is it do you think that alcohol makes you look attractive to women? You know, is it because genuinely alcohol makes you look sophisticated? Is it genuinely because alcohol makes women swoon when they see you? Or is it just because you've watched one too many James Bond films?
Mm.
You know, so start to really examine those beliefs that you have. Does alcohol cure your stress, or is it actually the biggest stress in your life? Start to just think about them and, you know, ask those questions. And, you know, it's an interesting ride. You never know what you will discover about yourself.
Funny that you say that when you first said, is it really that alcohol that makes women swoon, you know? And I was thinking, I don't know that I've ever been out and about, you know, and I'm thinking, God, that guy looks hot because he's got that beer in his hand. Like it was never, yeah, that's definitely not the
Yeah, no,
first thing.
it's an absolute load of rubbish. But like, honestly, look at any alcohol advert going, and there will always be a guy with a beer in his hand and a girl with a bikini who's smiling at him and giving him the eyes. I mean, it's absolutely not true. You know, you can go into the kind of things that members of the opposite sex are likely to find attractive about you. It's going to be things like sense of humor and honesty and you know, compassion and generosity and things like that. And then you can look at the effects of alcohol. Does alcohol make you funny? No, it makes you think you're funny, which is the opposite of funny. Does alcohol make you generous? No, not really. It tends to make people fairly small-minded. You know, does alcohol make you honest and open? Well, all you need to do is go to the doctor and, you know, when they ask you how much you're drinking, then answer that question. Does alcohol make you honest?
Yeah. So much to that. Well, good. So we've got and I love the titles of your books, Real Men Quit and Get Over Indulgence. I love that. So we'll put your links in the Desiree, the bio
description.
Yeah. And people can get your books on Amazon no matter where they are in the world, and we appreciate everything that you're doing out there.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Well, you too. We'll make sure that we have all the ways people can follow you linked below as well. And thank you so much for coming and sharing with us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, have a good night, and we will talk with you soon. And don't forget to reach out to Duncan.
Yep, you too. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right.
Cheers. Bye now. Thank you.